Could you please let me know in the chat if you can hear me well? Please write something in the chat. Okay, very well. Thank you. Before I give the floor to the presenters, I would like to give you a very brief overview of the platform in case it's the first time you are using Adobe. So, as you can see, there is a chat window where you can write your questions or comments, and your microphones will be muted, so please communicate in writing. Please pay attention to the polls. You already saw one on how you learned about the webinar, and we will be having more polls, so please pay attention to them. In case you lose the sound, the first thing you should do, please make sure that the microphone icon, which is located on the top black bar, is green. So click on it to make sure it's green. If you still have technical issues, please write to us in the chat. And also on the same top black bar, you can see an icon with a man with a raised hand. Please use it if you want to communicate your emotions or requests, like to speak louder or softer or slow down or anything similar. And now I would like to give the floor to Stephanie Delaney, who is going to facilitate this webinar. Stephanie, the floor is yours, and we will put the presentation now.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to see such a large group of people joining us for the webinar this afternoon. You'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to be talking for too long because I'm delighted that we've actually got two of our colleagues from the region who are going to be talking and explaining exactly what their approaches have been in the countries that they're working in. Just to say that obviously the Child Hub has been working with many countries in the region, particularly around the migrant and refugee crisis, and we've been also acting as a sort of place for people to be able to share ideas. And we thought that this is an ideal opportunity really to, coming up to the end of the year, to sort of do a bit of a review in terms of asking colleagues from two countries, Elena from Macedonia and Vahida from Slovenia, one at the sort of almost at the beginning of the journey in the Balkans and one towards the end of the region, as it were, to just to share with people what they've been doing in their countries in terms of good practice. And I guess for me, having been involved with the region, one of the things that I'm very interested in is also knowing perhaps or how things have changed over the last few months, and have we seen, is there a difference in the way that we're now working with refugees in the region? So I'm going to hand over to, first of all, to Elena and then to Vahida. Elena will tell you more about herself, I'm sure, but she works for UNICEF in the Macedonia country office, and she's directly involved in supporting the different initiatives that UNICEF there are implementing through local partners. So Elena will talk for a little bit and then and make her presentation, and then we'll have a see if people have got any questions or any comments, and then we'll sort of move on to Vahida, who will tell us about what's happening in Slovenia. So Elena, can I hand over to you?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Thank you, Stephanie. Just to introduce myself, I'm Ilana, as Stephanie already mentioned, Ilana Vlada-Velkovska. I'm working at UNICEF office in Macedonia as a national officer for child protection in emergency. What else I can say for me? I'm a social worker, specialist for management of strategic communication, and I have a degree for leadership and youth work from the Jönköping University in Sweden. Shortly about our organization, hello everyone, at the same time. Shortly about our organization, you can see now. Okay. What we do, we are doing a lot under child protection, establishing child-friendly spaces, For refugee and migrant children, we are providing psychosocial support and access to informal educational activities. We are providing technical assistance to strengthen support and protection for unaccompanied and separated children. Technical assistance to strengthen the capacities of frontline workers and including health workers, social workers, NGO staff, so that the best interests of children always come first. And we have educational activities, as I already mentioned, just to see everything functioning. Okay. We are providing educational activities as well as non-formal but also formal educational activities for children in transit center and under health and nutrition. Besides age-appropriate food, we are providing consultations for mothers how to continue their breastfeeding and to improve their care for the little ones. We have one additional component, it's wash. Under wash we are doing a lot also. Water and sanitation in transit center and public health information. NF5, non-food items. Usually we are providing season-appropriate supplies such as blankets, winter and summer clothes, baby clothing and other goods. Communication. We are doing advocacy and raising awareness to ensure that no matter where they are or where they come from, children are seen as children first and their rights are protected. In the same time, I would really like to know who are you on the other side. Interesting combination. We have a lot of students, practitioners, field workers in emergency. It's very nice to hear a little bit about your work, and if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to write your comments or raise a hand, as Evgenia mentioned at the beginning. Or if you're not hearing something well, just stop me, it's not a problem. Are you all done? Okay. Thank you, everyone. I don't know, have you had the chance to read something more about children uprooted, but there are nearly 50 million children that are uprooted, from which some of them transit through Macedonia and the so-called Balkan route. Actually, approximately 1 in 6 of the world's migrant children lives in Europe. These are some of the information and data that you can find in a report published by UNICEF early this year. As you can see, in front of you is the link from the document. We can discuss a little bit about child protection, because according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, all children have to be protected. These children have a need for different kinds of protection. What kind of protection we can see? We have to promote their well-being and ensure their survival, right to education and socio-economic development. The main aim is to prevent all forms of violence, abuse, exploitation and neglection of these children. How we are doing this? Through strengthening governmental commitment and capacities to fulfill children's rights to protection. We are developing SOP, standard operative procedures, improving through sensitization of the institution and governmental officials. We are initiating changes in the national and legal regulatives, etc. What do you think, why is important protection of refugee and migrant children? You can also write your answers in the pool in front of you. Yes, I can post. Just a second. Thank you, Ingrid, for reminding me for the opportunity. They are especially vulnerable groups because they face extra risk. They are practically vulnerable. Children are most vulnerable groups because their rights are not respected. they are in an unknown environment. All of these are answers that you write here, and I suppose you have a lot of them, are correct. There is no mutual and correct answer, but first and most is that these refugee and migrant children are children, and they must be treated like this. The treaty which sets the most standards concerning children is the CRC, or Convention on Rights of Children. And their rights are guaranteed here without discrimination of any kind, of any status, origin, ethnicity, religion, etc. These children are not refugee or migrant children, they are children, and they have to be protected. They are facing with bigger risk, but they are children at the end. They are facing with additional risk because they are on the move. Refugee and migrants, unaccompanied, especially and separate children, are the most vulnerable categories. Hundreds of them are still on the move through Southeast Europe despite the border closure. While on move, they are facing with a lot of, they are actually exposed to risk of deprivation, violence, neglection, and abuse. How we are trying to prevent this risk as UNICEF in Macedonia, I can share our experience in the country since 2015. Although none of the countries in the region, including Macedonia, were prepared to deal with migration of such a scale, all actors were learning by doing this is very important. At first, there was a lack of coordination among different stakeholders and a lack of standard operating procedures for protection of all vulnerable categories, and especially unaccompanied and separated children. The most important thing was to identify them and to do the registration. During the highest flow of people through the so-called Balkan route, identification of these unaccompanied and separated children or vulnerable categories was very difficult with a lack of collaboration between, as you know, Greek and Macedonian border authorities, as well as absence of appropriate identification documents. The official registration at the country's point of entry was initially incompleted, and only a third of all refugees and migrants entering the country were registered. The Greeks issued the registration paper were most often the only official document that were used by our authorities. These are some photos from the beginning of the crisis. What we did with our support, UNHCR and NGOs, the Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Labor and Social Policies, we worked together to develop the standard operative procedures for unaccompanied minors. These procedures provide clear guidance on referral mechanisms and on the role of the service providers, but unfortunately, they are not put into practice due to the lack of interinstitutional collaboration between MI and MLSP. The border police do not necessarily register all children entering the country and often even push them back on the other side of the border. So all our implementing partners were very efficient, and they were identifying these children. They were trained on procedures where to referral and how to do the follow-up with other service providers. We need to do something more. So since July 2015, UNICEF supports the government by strengthening the capacities of the centers for social work to facilitate the process and to improve the coordination of child protection among partners. Currently, MLSP has appointed 12 institutional guardians to look over all the unaccompanied minors, children, which are placed in safe house in both transit centers in Tabanovsk and Virgilia, as well as the Zalon center with Begovo. So I can say now at this point that these standard operating procedures for unaccompanied and separated children are good practice in Macedonia, and we are improving our implementation. The children are protected on different levels because they are very detailed and with concrete measures that you can see on the slide in front of you. The first standard operative procedure is for identification and referral, so we have clear measures here. The second is care and initial assistance. Afterwards, there is a regulating the stay of these children. If it's possible, we are trying to do the family reunification or return to their country. And if it's not possible, we are trying to integrate them in the society and to provide them with long-term assistance. If they are involved in criminal procedures, with these SOPs they are protected as defendants, witnesses or victims in different cases. This is one of our good practice. Let's discuss something more about the other one. As for the support provided for other children by UNICEF, like in all emergencies, we are establishing child-friendly spaces in both transit centers. Our implementing partners and other NGOs are providing psychosocial support and other basic services to these children and vulnerable categories. Why we did this? Because children have a real need to feel safe, sense of belonging, a relationship with their peers, also to have normal routine and daily life. But with the closure of the borders in March, UNICEF is supporting the reorganization of the services delivered to meet the new needs of the children. This includes provision of educational activities, firstly were non-formal, like native foreign languages, math, civic education, IT classes, etc. And you can see at the photos how at the beginning of the crisis, these so-called child-friendly spaces were only tents where the children have time to play and draw some drawings and feel free and safe at the beginning. Afterwards, we put these containers in the middle of the crisis. In the middle, I don't know when it is the end, but let's say during the summer period. These containers where they we provide additional non-formal, recreational, creative activities for the children and their parents. I've noticed some questions, but I don't know, does it come from Katerina? Okay, just to see what is the question, feel free to, okay, it's a motivation. Thank you, Katerina. And as I mentioned, we put these containers where the children have recreational, creative activities, and they've spent a lot of time with our staff and implementing partners. Do you think this was enough? This is enough? Again, you have a pool in front of you. Why is not enough? What do you think? Does someone want to raise a hand or write a comment? I will wait for your comment just a second to see. What about education? Thank you, Antonita. One of the biggest issues was that we didn't know how we need more child protection officers, not just educators in Serbia. Thanks, Olivera, for sharing your experience. Actually, we have at the moment like more than 50 field workers working for less than 150 children. So if we are talking about field workers, social workers, psychologists, and child protection officers, we have. But it's not enough because, as Antonita mentioned, these children have only a safe place to stay and to have recreational, creative activities, etc. We have to organize something more for them because they are out of the system for more than 2 years, out of the official educational system for more than 2 years. They are stuck in Macedonia for more than 8 months. So we have to provide another good practice that I would like to share with you, which is creation of a short curriculum for refugees and migrant children as a pre-integration phase in our society. Why we did this? Because of, as you already know, borders were closed, they are stuck here for 8 months. Most of the children were traveling for more than 2 years. Some of them didn't know how to write their name or to calculate basic math or something. So the other issue that we were facing was lack of preparedness of our society for their integration, especially of the Ministry of Education, because we don't have any kind of program for these refugee and migrant children. I believe it's more or less the similar situation in the Balkan region. Maybe you can share your experience in the chat. So what we did, we started the process of preparation for integration of refugees and children. In Macedonia, the biggest issue was interinstitutional collaboration, which is not functioning because of our current political situation. UNICEF, in collaboration with Ministry of Labor, managed to initiate one of the best practices in the region, preparation of a short curriculum for these children, in order to involve them more in the public schools. With our partner, Bureau for Education, we created this curriculum for pre-integration, and in the same time we managed to organize a capacity building for the educators in the field through trainings and on-the-job mentoring. When this program was ready, we organized a meeting between the ministries. I'm talking about Labor Ministry and Education, in order to start the process of adaptation and of the curriculum and to initiate changes in our legal regulative. The program is successful till now, and there are visible changes in the behavior of the children and their parents, which is very useful for us to see. Most of the children at the moment are speaking Macedonian and understanding Macedonian language, which is also another plus, and the parents are getting more and more involved in their children's life. They're trying to learn with them, they're studying languages with them, so we will see how the next phase is going. I can't wait. Their integration in our local schools. This was something short from me. Do you have any questions for now? If not, thank you for your attention. Stephanie?
Well, thanks for that, Elena. And I think it was really interesting to pull out those two kind of good practices, particularly around the building upon this model of learning by doing, which I think was actually, to be fair, what many countries in the region have been doing over the last sort of couple of years. But it's really nice to see or to hear from you how things have progressed, and particularly around your change of approach. And I guess I really picked up on 2 points. Firstly, the work that you've done to really strengthen the local government, or the local governments, through supporting the Centres for Social Work, and also instituting paid guardians, so there is a sort of a proper system for children, and being able to to do that in a way which also connects with developing systems within the country, so really helping the government to take on their role. And also, I guess the other thing I was thinking of was this flexibility in terms of how you have been using the child-friendly spaces and moving to this kind of much more structured pre-integration phase, as you called it. And certainly I know when I was in Macedonia at the beginning, it was very difficult. There were so many people coming through, and it was really very chaotic. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in an appreciative way, that people were just doing the best that they could. And I think even the photos showed, you only had a chance to show a couple, but if you look at the first one, everyone was kind of rammed on the floor, and it was all a bit ad hoc, and then seeing towards the end where it seemed a much more structured program. So thank you for that. Other people may have comments or reflections. If you want to, please feel free to carry on with in the chat box. But in the meantime, I will hand over to Vahida, and she's got a very different perspective, although there may be some similar messages, because Vahida's in Slovenia, and she works with Slovenia Philanthropy, which is one of the main NGOs that based in Slovenia, and so she's directly involved on the ground as a partner, working with the refugee and migrant children. So I hand over to Vahida. Thank you, Vahida.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not that old, but I'm old-fashioned and I prefer face-to-face meetings. I hope I'll manage this. If I don't do something properly, please apologize. I apologize for that in advance. Yes, as Stephanie said, I work with Slovene Philanthropy, which is one of the oldest and the organization with most experience in the field of migration, refugee, and asylum seeker situations. We've been there for a long time, and we implement different activities which are summarized under different program units. I will just brief on them here. Our main mission is the development of volunteer work, and that's why we have program unit on volunteering. The second and most important for this meeting is migrations. Then we deal with intergenerational cooperation, promotion of health, international and development cooperation, where I'm mostly involved, but since May 2016, I've been coordinating the project of psychosocial assistance to asylum seekers in asylum centers funded by UNICEF, and I'm going to present it today. But before I move on, I'd like to hear who we are talking to. If you have experience in directly working with refugees, asylum seekers, or migrants. Okay. Good. So most of us have experience, and we are on the same line then. Thank you. Slovene Philanthropy, Slovene Philanthropy was founded in '92 as a response to Balkan conflicts and refugee crisis, and has more than 24 years of experience, or not more, 24 years of experience in working with refugees and migrants, almost as many years as I have been in Slovenia, because I came at that time as a refugee to Slovenia, and I was the one who was immediately able to experience what it meant to be a refugee, but at the same time to be involved, because Slovene Philanthropy, which I like most with Slovene Philanthropy, immediately started to involve refugees themselves to be proactive in solving their own issues and the issues of the people, of refugees in general. At that time, we had more than 75,000 refugees in Slovenia, and we handled it very well. We applied a very integrated approach. In working with refugees, we worked with all generations, and the main focus were children, as is today. At that time, we also believed, as you believed in the Elena's presentation, that it's not enough to have only child-friendly spaces, because we need more integrated approach, more holistic approach, and this is what we did. At that time, we didn't have UNICEF in Slovenia. It was UNHCR agency, and we were its implementing partner from 1994 to 2007. Even at that time, as it was well known, we had also separated children. I was involved in the program where we had 480 separated children from 1 year old to 17 years old. Unlike today, they were with their families. Extended families, of course, which was more difficult for us to monitor in terms of monitoring their rights, any kinds of abuse or violence, etc. So from that time on, we have been dealing with the issues of separated children, and we've been working on protecting their rights. And from 2007, for example, to 2013, Slovene Philanthropy was the organization who was the only organization who acted as legal guardians to the unaccompanied minors and separated children who used to come, who are still coming to Slovenia. Only after 2013, the Ministry of Interior or Social Affairs started to introduce the practice of appointing legal representatives and guardians later on upon the protection status that is given to unaccompanied minors. All the experiences that we had in the past was easily used in the crisis that started to happen in 2015, as most of you know, and as Elena presented. We we, as Elena said, we were learning by doing. Yes, we had quite a lot of experience, but every situation is quite different. We didn't, at that time when the situation happened in the Balkan, we didn't go to the border to help on the border. But this time we went. Otherwise, but yes, the government wanted to do it themselves, but we wanted to be there as well. And even before the refugees started to come, we, for example, asked people if they are interested to volunteer, to go on the border to volunteer, and we were impressed with the interest by people. So we soon created a bank of volunteers who were interested to go to the border and help. And our office turned into the base operating system that was collecting volunteers, registering volunteers, and matching volunteers with the needs on the border. So we sent volunteers to help there to provide that more human approach, more human touch on the border, to give a smile, to give a hand to people, because unlike police and army, I mean, it's different. Then we worked on coordination of different stakeholders in the field. For example, other organizations were there. We provided coordination. Very soon we organized our coordinators in the field in cooperation with the Ministry of Social Affairs. We responded to the immediate needs of refugees, providing aid, for example, collecting aid for the people. We organized activities for children and parents in the reception centers, and with UNICEF at that time we had also child-friendly spaces. Then we were those who were monitoring what other stakeholders are doing in the field, and whether they are doing it in the line with the human rights. We had ongoing training for volunteers and supervision for volunteers. Along all these activities, we had public awareness raising activities, because we all know that the attitude towards refugees at that time was very negative. As a result of our response on the border, we were happy to see that in our bank of volunteers we counted more than 1,530 volunteers. And it is important to say that we had a big bank of people who had the first-hand experience in working with refugees and migrants. And later on, we hired people among these volunteers who continued to work in asylum centers. And when this big influx of refugees stopped in March 2016. And of course, we influenced the Administration for Civil Protection and Disaster Relief to open up for partnership with civil society organizations and involve volunteers. As I said at the beginning, they were not very willing to involve us. The government wanted to do it themselves. So that was what happened on the border. Now I'm moving to the post-border situation. With, as I said, we initiated our cooperation with UNICEF already on the border, and then in April, end of April and beginning of May, we re-entered our partnership, and now we are providing assistance in the asylum centers in Ljubljana and Logatec, two localities. So this post-border assistance is aimed to help refugees to settle down. We are trying to improve their well-being, to foster their integration to society. So we provide psychosocial assistance. We have health services for asylum seekers in general, not only children. We have volunteer services, awareness-raising activities, our ongoing process, and of course advocacy and policy influencing activities. We have orientation houses for the people who get the status and leave the asylum centers. I will turn to that later on. But everything we do is based on human rights. We are applying human rights-based approach in everything we do. So the program that we are implementing together with UNICEF, which is funded by UNICEF, is aimed to directly help children, asylum seekers and their families aged 3 to 18 years. But I have to say here that we even involve younger children, because mothers bring them to our spaces to to our facilitators, and we do help them as well. And the special group that we deal with and help are unaccompanied minors and separated children. I have to say we don't maybe have many children. We on average work with 60 children monthly, and 20% of those are separated children. Majority of them are boys, age 3 to 15. And majority of them come from Afghanistan. The second biggest group is other countries like Algeria or Morocco, then Syrian refugees in Iraq and Iran, the fourth group. Our target groups are, of course, other civil society organizations and the public institutions, governments, and general public. Whatever we do, if we provide services, we always take care of the systemic changes. We want to influence the system and look for the long-term solutions for these people. The program objectives is to bring some sense of normality to these children and their families, to provide children, especially unaccompanied minors who are very vulnerable, with psychosocial support that they need to better manage their problems and to cope with or overcome their traumas. To bring in more protective factors in the life of these children, because it's very important for their process of recovery, to break that chain of negative and accumulation of negative experiences, to help children and accompanied minors especially to develop personally, to develop skills needed for their independent life, to foster their social integration, to provide a model of service of assistance for children in Slovenia and asylum centers especially, and to ensure long-term and systemic solutions in addressing the needs of this population. The activities that we provide are diverse. They can include recreational activities, creative activities, sport activities, educational activities, all these activities that can help to reach the objectives. But as we always emphasize the integrated approach, we pay attention to all aspects of children's lives. For example, we pay a lot of attention to education, to access to education, and when children entered school, as many countries in the region, I believe, our school system is never prepared for these situations. We provide, for example, a lot of learning assistance. We do establish contacts with schools. We cooperate with teachers. We are advocating for some changes, trying to look for more durable solutions, but every aspect of the children's life is addressed in our program. I know that teachers in school say that they don't know what they would do if we were not there in the asylum centers, and that they rely much on us, but I think it should be in the system. We provide 7-day services, 8 hours a day, and we have about 15 facilitators employed in the field, and most of them are people we call them culture mediators, speaking Arabic or Farsi or other languages. And as I said at the beginning, we do apply this participatory approach where we give people coming from these ethnic backgrounds to be actively involved in their own affairs. And I have to say that most of these mediators are children who are young people now who used to be unaccompanied minors that we assisted in the past in Slovenia. Of course, as is it usually in their life, nothing goes smoothly, so I would like to hear from you if you have any challenges in working with refugee children. You can write down your answers. I hope I will manage them. Your questions, I will manage them, sorry. Okay. I can see we have similar challenges. Yes, schools. lack of, okay. So, okay. Very interesting. I think we have quite similar challenges. We can say that I'm sure now that we are working with migrants and refugees. Yeah. Now you will see from my presentation, from my next slides, that the challenges are quite similar, if not the same. Some of the challenges are, as you could see, on organizational level, on policy level, on the way the public institutions operate, but what we face in everyday work is structure versus non-structure. For example, we work in the asylum centers, and asylum centers, especially in Ljubljana, are not the prison-like, and people can go out and in when they want, and we cannot impose any rules or special structure. So if you work with children, and especially unaccompanied minors who are up to the age of 17, it's very difficult to say we work from this time to that time. So they can be cooperative or not cooperative. And we cannot impose the rules of them. Of course, even we don't want that, but it's difficult to work in the structures as it is. And it's very related to work environment. And then we are facing the challenges, with the fluctuation and turnovers of migrants or asylum seekers. You start some program and then people leave or new groups come, and then you have to integrate all these turnovers. Then we have many languages, and we sometimes cannot provide interpreters for all these languages. For example, we have only one Pashto-speaking interpreter, and he's in one group in the whole Slovenia. So translators, interpreters, or cultural mediators, how we call them, are translating, but we are never sure if the translation is good or not. We cannot check it because we don't speak the language. Then, especially at the beginning, we have different ethnic groups and tensions among these groups, which they can fight a lot, and the fights can be very lovely, and we cannot understand it. But eventually, and luckily, these things calm down. When working with children, we have different age, different interests, and it's very difficult to apply a group approach or to apply the similar activities with these diversities. Then cultural differences, girls, boys, what is allowed, what is not allowed, especially at the beginning. Then challenges a large number of stakeholders in the field, different NGOs, volunteers, legal representatives to unaccompanied minors, etc. Then you have to coordinate all these stakeholders and do the things smoothly, which is not very easy. And of course, all these stakeholders, and especially public institutions, civil society activities, we have different approaches in our, while civil society are more proactive, they would like to do things immediately. Public institutions are more slowed down, and they don't see the things in the same way. Then there is absence of systematic, professional, comprehensive, and friendly assistance to refugees. For example, some children, especially unaccompanied minors, would need more systematic assistance, and it's not there. It's only when we arrange it, and half an hour is not enough. Then, as you said, uncertainty, slowness of requests and handling processes. For example, if we notice something is not doing properly, we can report on it, but then the institutions can take their time. It can last for a long time. Children, and especially minors, unaccompanied minors, are under the influence of adults in the asylum centers, and culturally they listen to adults, to other people, and that's we have to work with them quite carefully. They can either convince them into going further to another country, or to take to some harmful substances, for example. Then less attention is devoted to adults and families. When we start working with refugees, we usually all focus to children, but in my opinion, you cannot help children if you don't deal with the families. It has to be a child-oriented and integrated approach. There are many holes in the system. Who does what? What is the role of the school? Who helps the school? Who prepares the school? If people have access to health services, but if you send people in a small community to the medical center, the doctors will say we don't know anything about it, because different stakeholders and institutions are not sufficiently informed about asylum seekers and refugees' rights and entitlements. It takes time, and we work a lot on informing the public. Public institutions and other are not prepared to accept the work and the work with asylum seekers and refugees. For example, unaccompanied minors, the first groups were resettled and moved to dormitories, but we have the impression that the staff there was not well prepared for this group. We think that training, capacity building is needed much in advance to be able to work with this population. Many things depend on individuals. Some individuals are very committed and they will pursue things, and this should be the other way around. The whole system should be oriented towards changing things and improving the things. Then problems related to housing, especially at the beginning, it was very evident. Children would get the protection, international protection status, but then they would stay in the asylum centers for a long time because the housing was not in place. Now we hope with the new decision that they are immediately moved to dormitories, especially unaccompanied minors, that this will change. Despite all these challenges that we face, we have some results and achievements that we have to be happy with. We have the system of work and methodology that we developed and that we are developing, learning by doing, and it works. It is in the place. For the first time, unaccompanied minors in these asylum centers are not on their own. They are provided with the structures in the place that with the structures in the place that is that doesn't have a lot of structure. They have the schedules that they follow on, which is very important for them. The everyday of children is filled with a meaningful content. Children and their families and accompanying minors as well are provided with psychosocial assistance. The program somehow became an integrated part of the asylum centers. They somehow count on us and they know that we are there and it's part of the asylum center everyday life. Coordination of different stakeholders is in place. We coordinate different NGOs, UN ministries, UN agencies, schools, youth clubs, youth crisis centers, and we've been working on that. It's an ongoing process. It is in place and it is established, but it can be always improved. The system of monitoring of children's rights and violation of cases of violence against children is in place, and we especially work with our team in the field. We always build up their knowledge on how to monitor, how to report, and what to do. Once the refugees, asylum seekers get the status, they are moved out of the asylum centers. It doesn't happen immediately, it takes some time, but then we have the program, so-called orientation program, which lasts for 3 months. In that program, we provide people with all assistance that they need, for example, how to approach health sector, education sector. We help them to integrate as much as possible. Of course, this is not enough. 3 months is not enough, but luckily there is another organization that takes them over and then helps them to look for the place to live, for the apartment, etc., etc. As I said at the beginning, whatever we do, it comprises everything. It's not only one activity, and along all these activities, services for refugees, and complementing all our program units, migration, volunteers, volunteering, health sector, we are working all the time on strengthening the formal systems to ensure long-term results on a systemic level. So this is how we are trying to influence the health sector, the educational sector, the social sectors, and I have to say here that maybe when I was a refugee and when I worked with refugees, things there were problems, and these problems are still present, but the environment in which we work just changed. So maybe some methods of, for example, checking the proper age of unaccompanied minors are more sophisticated, or not sophisticated, more new, modern, but the problems remain the same. So efforts are aimed to improve the access to education, to legal, social, health, and other related services in Slovenia. We are making efforts, but we will continue to make them even more because we are not satisfied with the things and with what is going on. So I hope I was not too long. If I forgot something, you don't know. So if you have any question, please write. I have to admit I was not able to follow the chat because, as I said at the beginning, I'm quite new in this. So, okay.
Okay, thank you, Vahida. That was very interesting, and I think from a very sort of different perspective. And I guess one of the things that really struck me, and I know that you know, obviously you talked as well about, you know, the need to work with the system, but I guess I was so struck at the 1,530 volunteers and this kind of huge mobilization of the community to be able to, you know, to be able to participate and to be able to support. I'm just wondering if just from those volunteers, do you still have, you know, are they still on your books? Are they still engaged? Or have you found that they've kind of, you know, gradually filtered away as things have changed?
I had to say that I'm very proud to be in Slovenia because of these volunteers. It's so moving when I start to speak about them. When the crisis started to happen, I went once to the border and emotionally it was too much for me. But those volunteers, they did wonderful things. And they are still with us. We have hundreds of volunteers active on a daily basis. And as I said, among those volunteers who were very present on the border, we also we employed people who are now today working with the children in asylum centers. So Slovene philanthropy is well known for volunteer work development, and I'm proud of Slovenia just because of this volunteer movement. And even though there are negative attitudes towards refugees and asylum seekers in general, volunteers give me the hope that things can be much better and that there is humanity in us. Hello? Thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
It's a completely different approach, but it's great. I noticed a few people are just writing in the chat box, and I guess probably for both of you, I'll just go through. We've got one question which is presumably for Vahida and also for Elena, but are the SOPs public? So I guess the question is, can somebody get their hands on them if they're really interested?
SOP?
If they're interested. The standard operating procedures. Maybe
yes.
Elena particularly talked about them. Are they public? Can people get copies of them? Are they only for internal use with the agencies that are working with the refugees?
In Macedonia, they are public.
Yeah.
You can find it on our website because they are like official documents. But I'm trying in the meantime to find the link, and I cannot. Ultimately, as I find the link, I will share it with you. Just in.
Yeah, and you know what would be good, Elena? Maybe you could just actually send the link to the Child Hub, and we can. I'm saying we. I mean, Evgenia can put the link on the hub or something in case people are interested. You know, because there's an opportunity for people to upload documents there. I see Elena's written and said, you know, at the moment there are only stories, but you know, also a lot of implementing partners are also doing sort of monitoring as well through the teams, and we've got Irma and Philip both typing as well. So we'll wait to. Oh, hang on, there's more things. Ingrid saying, sounds like a very well-grounded system. It's, yes, I mean, building on 24 years of knowledge, as it were.
But every time we have a new situation.
Yes, of course, of course. And also it's always really, I was interested personally when you talking about the number of partners, and it's so great to have a lot of partners, but then I'm sure we can all understand why sometimes having a lot of partners is actually also sometimes not so great, because it's quite, it's much more difficult to coordinate. There's a lot of people to help, but there's a lot of ways that things can spiral off and mixed messages and confusing approaches and duplications. It's a lot more work from that perspective, really.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay. We're just waiting for a couple of people who are busy typing their questions. Ali saying thank you.
It's easier.
Okay, so Philip's asking, there are some colleagues who couldn't make the webinar. Is there an email version of the presentation? And saying also it was very interesting. Philip, for your information, that on the Child Hub, normally there's a recording of the webinar. So it won't be, within the next 10 minutes, but at some point in the very soon period, the Child Hub will put the webinar up onto the Child Hub for people to look. And in fact, it's for colleagues who may be interested, it's worthwhile knowing that actually all of the webinars are on there, and there have been several different webinars around the themes of refugee and asylum seeking and migrant children. There may be other ones which are of interest that people can download. I remember there was a very interesting webinar not quite a few months ago now, but was done about, was actually done, and I'm going to get this totally wrong, it was either from a colleague in Croatia or Bosnia. I was so much more interested in the topic than where she came from, I have to say. And she'd done a lot of work with adult children who were, whose parents had experienced trauma and war, mainly through the conflict in the region, 25 years ago. And that was very interested in terms of thinking about what she had experienced with them, and now those children were adults, how that kind of related to the work. So some interesting stuff on there. Anybody else writing? Oh, yes, sorry.
I agree with Irma just wrote the last statement. I agree, but as I said at the beginning, what I appreciate with philanthropy is also that they apply this participatory approach where they give the migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers opportunity to say, yes, we need this, we would like to do this. And I also have to say that among volunteers in Slovenia, we have asylum seekers and refugees, and they teach us Arabic or Farsi languages, etc., or help children in asylum centers, provide learning assistance. So we are doing our best to ask them what they need. And this is how we can also do the advocacy activities. We cannot do it just based on our beliefs.
Yeah, and I guess that's also something that's changed as well over the period of time, in that, I mean, it's sad for people that the borders have shut, but actually, the other disadvantage is that actually you've now got a pool of people that you can do the consultation with. And I wasn't in Slovenia at the time, but certainly being in Macedonia at the time, I mean, there were so many people coming through, and they were staying for 1 or 2 hours, and people who were working with the children were saying, I'd really like to be able to work with this person properly and ask them what they need, but they're just coming for food and then they're moving on.
Yeah.
So you've got more time to do consultation, and obviously as you're starting to know the children more, you'll be able to develop relationships, and children are more likely to tell you what they think rather than what they think you might want to hear now, because they're developing those relationships, aren't they? Also, we had a question which is, are you confronted with a situation when unaccompanied and separated children disappear from the asylum centres? And I guess in Slovenia's case that would also include because they're now actually in the high school dormitories instead. is there an issue there for you with people disappearing?
They are still in asylum centers. At the moment we have 12 unaccompanied minors. 2 days ago there were 18. So some of them left, some came. So the turnovers are going on all the time. And they are not immediately sent to dormitories. So my concern and our concern is also that these children disappear and nobody knows what happens. Yes, if they were here in the asylum centers, they later on establish contacts with us, with our facilitators. But the problem is that they just disappear over the night, so they find their way. Yeah. But I attended.
So
I attended one where
children are missing.
Yes, but luckily they're all safe now, and because they write to our facilitators in the field, we are here. They use Skype, they use chats, and inform them. But they don't. We don't know how they disappear over the night.
We have the same issue.
Is there any suspicion that it may be trafficking or something like that?
I can't.
That they're some sort of criminal gang or something like that, or do you think it's just individuals doing their own thing, or is it too hard to say?
It's too hard to say. So far we have good experience because it was members of their families that took them to other countries, but we are aware that these things can happen, and what we are trying to do with these unaccompanied minors, that we are trying to talk to them, to inform them about these things. Yes, these minors, when they come, they are 10 times more mature than our adolescents or young people. So, but we are warning them about these dangers. And of course, in our advocacy campaigns, we talk about these things, and this is why we are present in the centers, to help these children, to protect them. And this.
Okay, I see Irma's writing and a couple of other people. Katerina, how are we getting on with time? I've now completely lost track. I was too interested in the presentation to keep track on the time. Can you remind us how long we've got?
Stephanie, this is Evgenia. Well, I think we should be finishing soon, but in case people have questions, I mean, we still can keep going for 10 minutes maybe.
Okay, great. Sorry, I thought it was about now, but then I was, as I say, I was interested in the presentation more than the time. Don't ask me to facilitate again, is the lesson from that. Okay. Okay, so, and Katerina is actually saying, actually the recordings will be up tomorrow for people. This is an interesting comment, I think, from Irma, maybe a reflection. I don't know if either of our presenters want to mention it, want to reflect on it, but saying, you know, what's been seen in the field is that very often coordination is based on what organisations stand for, or I guess what they do, rather than coordination based on what people's needs are. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
I think I answered this question too. I agree with Irma. In general, things happen like this, but concretely I can speak about Slovene philanthropy, and because I know how Slovene philanthropy works. I was once a beneficiary and refugee. They do ask people, final beneficiaries, what are their needs, and we are responding to those needs. We involve people in meeting these needs as well. So I, as a refugee, was very active from the first day, helping myself, but also helping, yeah. And this is what I like with our organization. This is why I'm there for so many years.
I guess it's probably true, though, that I mean, it's interesting that Slovene philanthropy, you know, is a volunteer, you know, it's got this great volunteer core basis, as it were, and maybe that makes it do that more. I wonder if other agencies, like ministries or people like that, may not be so keen on getting people to participate or asking them what they need. Yeah. Maybe they try to, maybe they're hampered by.
Public institutions, governments have always different approaches. They are more bureaucratic than us. We are more proactive, we want to do things to happen now, we are more people, close to people, we understand them maybe better than the governments. We have different approaches. And I agree, there is a difference. Also, different organizations come with, as Irma said, with their own ways of doing things. We need this, and this is how it is going to implement it. Projects are alive projects. We work with the people, and we have to adapt to their needs in the context that we work.
Yeah, I just noticed that Alice just picked up and said, well, actually, over 340 unaccompanied minors have disappeared in Sweden this year. So that's interesting. Okay, I'm conscious of the time. I don't know if anybody's got anything else they would like to say, or maybe we should kind of call it to an end there. Oh yes, hang on.
Just a reply.
And Elena talked a little bit about the difference with the UN. You know, things are a bit different because they're basing their plans on, you know, they're doing this participatory approach directly on the site. But obviously, you know, it's
because we are planning.
Yes, it's a slightly different way of working, but it's still based on consultation.
Yes.
I'm just to say I understand, or if I remember correctly, what we normally do is some sort of poll at the end of the webinar. Afterwards, just to send you the link and everything, and just to say it would be really interesting, and I'm sure Evgenia and Katerina would be really interested to hear if anybody's got any ideas of webinars that you think would be useful, so topics of webinars, but also if anybody is interested in running a webinar on something. The team at Child Hub, Evgenia and Katerina, will give you, you know, support to help you with all of the technology, and, you know, teach you how to do the polls, and you'll be, you know, another skill set to add to your CV if you don't already have it. And it would just be, so if you've got any ideas or any feedback, please do let the Hub know. And also, if you're not a member of the Hub, please think about joining it. It's free, but it does give you the possibility to sort of know about things which are happening within the region, research, documents, a place for sharing. And I noticed that Evgenia has just put up the email for the Hub, and obviously the website is just childhub.org. If that's it, I'm going to say I shall close it now, unless anybody's got anything else they want to say. And to say thank you very much to our presenters, to Elena and to Vahida, because it's, you know, it's really nice that people do this, because we all learn from each other, but it does take time for people to pull these things together. So I really appreciate both of them for their really interesting presentations.
Thank you for listening to us, and especially to me. As I said, this is my first experience. I prefer face-to-face. I would be much better if I could see your faces. So maybe next time it will be better. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe next time we all come to Slovenia.
Okay, you are welcome.
See you soon.
See you.
I would like to say two things before we finish. First, if any of the participants would like to have a certificate of attendance for this webinar, please email us at the email I wrote 2 minutes ago, info@childhub.org, and Katarina will send you the certificate. And the second, I would like to take the opportunity to tell you about 2 upcoming webinars we have in the future. This is the link where you can find more information, and next week we have a webinar on working with children and their caregivers and challenges we face. And in 2 weeks we have a very interesting webinar on discussing sexuality with young people. So please read the descriptions and sign up if you think it's relevant and interesting for you. And thank you very much, Stephanie, for facilitating, and Viljana and Vahida for your wonderful presentations. And have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Can I just ask a question? We will keep the chat box open for a little bit longer in case people have got something that they need to say to us, yeah?
Yes, sure, please.
Okay.
I mean, I
So
will
if you're in the middle of typing, carry on. The box will be open for a bit longer. But good night or good afternoon wherever you are, and hope to hear or see you again sometime somewhere. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.